only time Justin Trudeau has fired a minister is when they stood up to him. It was Jody Wilson-Raybould. She refused. She called him out. And out of cabinet, out of the Liberal Party.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Northern Perspective. We are very, very thrilled to be able to bring you this interview. We've been chasing it probably since we started covering OGO and Arrive Scam, SCTC, Randy Bois, there's about 10 different scandals that they're covering. And as you've seen, the Conservatives bring in ringers into these committees to ensure that they're extracting the information that they need in order to hold this government to account and to inform Canadians what is going on within this Liberal government. So without further ado, it is our pleasure to welcome to the show Michael Barrett. Michael Barrett, welcome to Northern Perspective.
Hey, I'm so excited to be on your show. I'm an avid watcher, so this is exciting for me.
It's exciting for us too.
It's exciting that you're an avid watcher, so that's great. But one of the things that I saw when I was researching your profile for the show, and we talked a little bit about this off camera, but I'm sure many Canadians don't know, is that you used to serve in the Canadian Armed Forces. So thank you for your service, and maybe just give us 30 seconds of what you did.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm proud to have had the opportunity to serve in the Canadian Armed Forces. I was a non-commissioned member, a telecommunication lineman, served at CFB Edmonton, and it really gave me the perspective to know about the hard work, the selflessness that the men and women in our Canadian forces give to our country every day. It's very quiet work. We don't know as Canadians that this kind of goes on behind the scenes in communities right across our country. I was a member of the Reg Force, but we also have primary reservists, citizen soldiers in virtually every community across Canada. And so while I was a tradesperson, I worked along people in all sorts of different occupations in the military. It was the honor of a lifetime to be able to serve Canada, and I just think that it's the highest calling service in our Canadian forces, and I'm very grateful for everyone who has and continues to serve.
And we talk a lot on the show that I think veterans from armed forces and people currently serving in the armed forces, we do not talk about that enough in day-to-day Canadian culture, and we're working to try and change that. So let's get into this.
You served in the armed forces, but you're now serving as an MP, and I think one of the things that our community tells us, along with wanting an election, the thing that they want the most is accountability in our government. How is the Conservatives going to do that?
So I've had the opportunity to serve almost since the start of my term as an MP 6 years ago in an accountability role for the official opposition. And as Shadow Minister for Ethics and Accountable Government, I have been on different committees, as you mentioned, whether it's the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics, or the Government Operations Committee, or Public Accounts, Justice and Human Rights. I mean, dealing with Randy Boissonneau lately, even on Indigenous and Northern Affairs. I kind of go where the accountability needs to be brought.
It's everywhere.
and after 9 years of Justin Trudeau, there's a real need for that accountability, and it's a really long list. We don't have time today to go through every single one of Justin Trudeau's scandals, which is actually really disappointing as a Canadian. Yes, I want an election just like everyone who's watching your show. I think that Canadians deserve a government, a new government, a common sense government for a number of reasons. But it's so disappointing to see that we have in Justin Trudeau's NDP Liberal government the least ethical and least accountable and least transparent government in the history of our country. And so we really need to we need to elect a Conservative government for the same reasons in some ways that we did in 2006. And the Accountability Act that was brought in under Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper set the framework for many of the ways that we've been able to expose the serial ethical lawbreaking of Justin Trudeau's Liberal government. And in 2006, the Conservative Party ran on a platform that included accountability as a major plank of that. And they set a bunch of accountability mechanisms. And I just want you to imagine Stephen Harper and his Conservative government opening up a bunch of bear traps and putting them on the ground and saying, don't step in these, because the past Liberal government, they didn't understand what ethics and accountability were. So now we're saying that if you step in these, we know that you've broken the rules. And so they telegraphed that to their own government and to all future governments. Now, Stephen Harper, of course, was never found to have broken Canada's ethics laws, but Justin Trudeau and his government, they stepped in every single one of those, bear traps that are, spray painted fluorescent orange. And Justin Trudeau broke Canada's ethics laws twice. He's been found guilty of that. So has his now public safety minister, Dominic LeBlanc. So has the trade minister, Mary Ng. So did the former finance minister, Bill Morneau. So did the Prime Minister's parliamentary secretary, now the Liberal Speaker, Greg Fergus. They all broke those laws that were put in place. So now we have the benefit of hindsight, just like Stephen Harper did in 2006. And Pierre Poilievre is looking at the kind of rules that would be necessary, the kind of framework that Canadians need, because in 2006, we looked back and said, well, these are the rules that could have been in place to prevent some of the ethical wrongdoing of the past Liberal government. Well, they broke all those rules, so now we need to put in new rules. And my private member's bill is one of the ways, one of those accountability mechanisms that Conservatives think are really important, and it has to deal with some of the problems, some of the bigger problems that we've seen, like people coming before committee and lying, people committing contempts before Parliament, people perjuring themselves when they're under oath. And they say, well, why aren't there any consequences for that? And well, we didn't need them before, because people came before Parliament largely and did the right and honorable thing. Now, there's a couple of exceptions in recent years. In the early 2000s, you had the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP and the former Privacy Commissioner who both were found to have committed contempt. They were both found in contempt for having lied to committee. And now the examples seem to with the NDP Liberals. We're seeing it regularly, whether it's Christian Firth or the Liberal official from the Public Health Agency of Canada refusing to turn over Winnipeg lab documents. You've got Stephen Anderson. That's a question that's before the House right now in the other Randy scandal. It's becoming more and more frequent. And so this bill, quite simply, my private member's bill, it proposes common sense penalties, fines of $50,000 for anyone who's found to have committed a contempt against a House of Parliament, and a mandatory minimum of 6 months in prison for perjuring for perjury before Parliament. And
that's Bill C-405 that we've talked about before, and that 6 months in prison, that goes up to a maximum of 14 years, does it not?
That's right, yeah. And so we have that limit of 14 years, but there's no minimum. And I think that, and when you see committees, sometimes the Liberals bristle when we talk about administering an oath, having witnesses swear an oath. And you wonder, why is it that they don't want them to swear an oath? Because if you're coming and you're going to tell the truth, well, why wouldn't you swear to tell the truth? We just assume that everyone would. So why do the Liberals oftentimes try and prevent that from happening? And the reason is because once you've sworn that oath, you could be prosecuted for perjury, and that does carry a sentence of up to 14 years in prison. But it needs to have teeth. We need anyone who swears an oath to understand that perjury would carry a minimum of 6 months in jail.
So in the 405 bill, it talks specifically about contempt of Parliament. It talks specifically about perjury. It doesn't deal with the actual consequences or penalties for ethics violations in there from what I've seen. Is that something that the Conservative government is going to be looking at bringing in after taking power?
Yeah, we obviously need to have a wholesale review of all of these things. Again, it would have seemed enough. It seemed like enough in 2006 to say no prime minister, no cabinet minister is going to want to be found guilty and have a public shaming. You hear that from the ethics commissioners. They say the intent was, it wasn't about a $200 fine. It was about the shame of being found to have broken the act, broken the law. And now we have a prime minister and ministers routinely breaking that law, and that public shaming doesn't seem to be enough. So we have to take a look at it, of course, and see, what is enough. And I get feedback from people all the time. I hear from experts, former, people who were formerly involved in parliamentary legal counsel, and I hear from constitutional experts, and they have some suggestions on what that could look like. And so, we're going to take a look at that because it's critical that this all goes back to people being able to Canadians being able to have confidence in the institutions that we hold dear, and that includes our Parliament, which has such an important role for members of Parliament, to hold the executive accountable. This is our raison d'etre. If we just give it all over to the executive, if we just turn the keys over, can you imagine the roughshod that Justin Trudeau and his NDP Liberal government would run over our freedoms and our rights on a regular basis? And it's not for nothing that Conservatives have raised our voices, even when we were told by the commentariat, by the Liberals' favorites at the CBC and the Toronto Star, that Conservatives, you're on the wrong side. You know what? We're on the side of Canadians, and that's always the right side. And
you've talked about this, and we hear this on a day-to-day basis. Canadians, by and large, have lost trust in the government as an institution. So do you think that one of the ways, or maybe the only way to earn that back, is once Conservatives take government, putting in these penalties, these mandatory penalties for perjury, putting in the tougher penalties for ethics violations, that Conservatives walk the walk in that they intend to hold themselves account, never mind future governments?
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at what took place under a previous Conservative government, when there were issues that frankly, even distracted from the work that government was doing, the standard, the Westminster tradition of ministerial accountability was acted on regularly. I mean, you could come up with a short list of ministers who believed themselves that they had fallen short, or the Prime Minister believed that they fell short, and they no longer served in cabinet. And hearken back to a time of a $16 glass of orange juice and a Conservative cabinet minister leaving cabinet over that as a scandal. And now you look at the tens of millions and sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars and the inside dealing that has gone on with the Liberals, flat out lying by ministers of the Crown, and they're not fired. The only time Justin Trudeau has fired a minister is when they stood up to him. It was Jody Wilson-Raybould, and Justin Trudeau had attempted to interfere in a criminal prosecution by leaning on the Minister of Justice and Attorney General. She refused. She called him out, and out of cabinet, out of the Liberal Party. And the only person who stood up for her was Jane Philpott, and she got tossed too. And that's the difference between Liberals and Conservatives. And I can guarantee you that that standard of ministerial accountability and the unwillingness to break the trust that Canadians have put in us, should we be given the opportunity to govern for Canadians, not govern Canadians, govern for them, that you can guarantee that return to accountability comes with a common sense conservative government with Pierre Poilievre.
Well, on behalf of Canadians, thank you so much for the work you do. Thank you so much for the work that the Dream Team does, which includes, but not excluding, Stephanie Kuzy, Larry Brock, Kelly Block,
Mr. Jennis,
Garnet Jennis, Michael Cooper, and all of the rest of them. That is what is giving Canadians hope that there is a brighter future down the road, and we're looking forward to a government based on integrity and accountability rather than corruption and cost. So thank you very much.
It's a real honor, and you listed outstanding parliamentarians who work incredibly hard here in Ottawa and for their communities. But the 118 Conservative MPs, we have an incredible caucus, and what's so exciting for me is that we're going to bring another 100 or so MPs, common sense Canadians, to serve in a Conservative government to Ottawa. And if this is who we're working with right now, I'm so excited to get to work for Canadians. A lot of times it can seem really depressing when you look at what Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh are doing to our country. But Canada was not like this before them, and it's not going to be like this after them. And I'm so hopeful for our wonderful country. It gives me, I'm a father of 5 children. It gives me such great hope for my children and for future generations that we're going to be able to turn this around for them.
Let's bring it home.
Let's bring it home.